Hey there, it's me Eden. Welcome to Crossdressing Adventure Stories. Today I'm going to share with you cross-dressing adventure stories called Classmate Turned Me into a Sissy, Part 10. So, if you're new to the channel, then please consider subscribing and be a part of our inclusive community. Did your family just move to town? I can't remember ever hearing Kathy or the other girls talk about you until just recently. Blake was caught by surprise, but luckily Mrs. O'Connor intervened quickly. Pam's family is new to town. It's just amazing how fast she became friends with the club members. They just really hit it off great. Well, you probably will have to have the bridesmaid dress altered a bit, since Pamela is a few inches taller than Brad's cousin. That's one of the things we were planning to do today, Mrs. O'Connor said, and I think we had better get a move on it. With that, she continued on up the stairs, and led Blake into her bedroom and shut the door behind them. She had a large, spacious bedroom with a private bath just like Kathy's. I'm going to pretend that you are either Kathy or Beth to make it easier for me to talk to you about periods. Okay? Blake nodded his agreement. Now, your period is nothing for you to be frightened about. I realize that you will see some blood coming out, but this is just nature's way of getting you ready to have babies. All girls experience some cramping and maybe other symptoms like headache and irritability, so don't be alarmed if any of these things happen to you. I won't, Mrs. O'Connor. She led Blake into the bathroom and reached into a cabinet and took out a large package of Maxipads. Here, take one of these, she said, offering the box to Blake. He reached in and took out one of the pads, which were individually wrapped in pink plastic pouches. Now I'll teach you how to use this to catch the blood. First, let me show you how I wear them. I'm near the end of my period and am wearing one right now. First, you sit down on the toilet seat. Mrs. O'Connor sat down and lifted up her short nightie and pulled down her panties, revealing a pad with some traces of blood in it. You see, there isn't much blood here, not enough to change pads yet. See how the pad is held in my panties? Now you sit down and see if you can put in a pad. Blake walked over to the toilet and was immediately confused as to whether he should lift his skirt up or take it off before sitting down. What should I do? Take off my skirt or lift it up? Well, Pamela, you can do whichever is most comfortable depending on the outfit. If you are careful, you can just lift up your skirt, but make sure you don't get any blood on it. That would be very embarrassing. If that doesn't seem possible, then you can take it off. Blake decided he would try lifting up the skirt. He raised it from the bottom over his waist and then realized he had to get the slip also. This he managed to also pick up. Then, holding the skirt and slipping up in one hand, he used his other to lower his pantyhose and panties until they were down to his knees. He then sat down on the seat. Now open up one of the pouches. Blake did as he was instructed and took out a long white pad folded in 3 sections with a strip of wax paper covering some adhesive. Now remember to save the pouch so that you can dispose of the used pad when done. Now pull off the strip and carefully place the pad in your panties. Mrs. O'Connor guided Blake's hand so that the pad was positioned in just the right place. Now press it in firmly. Very good. I think you've got the hang of it. It'll take a little getting used to wearing it. For example, you'll feel the lump of the pad in your panties pressing against your vagina while you walk. But eventually you'll be entirely accustomed to it. I think I understand how to use the pads. I guess I should carry a few in my purse? Yes, of course. And you realize that you can use some of the thinner pads when you think that your period might be about to start. That way you won't have an accident. At night, there are some really large pads that you can use to catch the heavy bleeding that you might have over a long period. But what about tampons? When are they used? Obviously, you can't use them, but I agree that you should know about them since all girls do. Kathy and the other younger girls usually use these, so why don't I ask if one of them would come in here and give you a lesson on them? Mrs. O'Connor left to go to Kathy's room to speak to the girls. Pamela needs to learn about tampons, and we are wondering if any of you are having your period now and could give her a little demonstration? Mrs. O'Connor, I'm wearing one right now and I was going to be changing it soon, Penny said. I'll be happy to show Pam what to do. Me too, said Janet. I'll come along also. With this, Penny, Janet and Mrs. O'Connor went back to Blake, who was still sitting on the toilet seat. You can pull up your panties and pantyhose, Pamela. I think we are all done with the pads. Mrs. O'Connor said. Okay, Blake said as he got up and did as she said. I can feel the pad. But it's not uncomfortable. Good. They really aren't that much of a nuisance. Now Penny and Janet are each going to show you how they use tampons. Penny unzipped her jeans and slid them down her legs, revealing her delicate white panties. She lowered these and then sat down on the toilet seat. Blake could see her pubic hair with a white string dangling out. See, the first thing I do is pull out the old tampon using this string. Why don't you do it, Pam, so you can see what it feels like? Very gingerly, Blake took hold of the string and pulled it. The tampon didn't move. It won't move. Yes, it will if you give it more force. Don't be afraid to really pull on it. This time Blake pulled harder and it started to move out. It's moving. Blake cried and the two girls and Mrs. O'Connor laughed. He kept on pulling until it suddenly came out. It was covered with a little blood and Penny quickly covered it with tissue paper. Now we just put that in the trash, never in the toilet. Now I take a new tampon and put it in. She took a tampon out of her purse, took off the wrapper and handed it to Blake to look at. You see, it has an applicator which you put into your vagina and then push out the tampon into yourself, leaving the string to dangle outside. She proceeded to insert it and with expert fingers was done in a couple of seconds. Now you can throw out the applicator. Why don't you try the whole procedure on me, said Janet. I'll just sit here and you do everything. Okay, I'll try it. Penny stood up and pulled back up her panties and jeans. Then Janet unzipped her pants, pulled them down with her panties and sat on the seat with her legs spread wide. Blake then very delicately kneeled in front of her and pulled out the tampon, put it in some tissue and threw it out. Then he took a fresh tampon and inserted it slowly into Janet's vagina. Janet winced slightly and Blake said with some alarm, I'm not hurting you, am I? No, Blake, it's just very sensitive, particularly when someone else is touching my vagina. You must know that also. The tampon applicator was now half in and Blake continued pushing on it. Finally it reached the right spot and Janet said, That's perfect. Now push in the tampon and take out the applicator. Blake did as he was told and then with evident pride said, Okay, all done. I'm so happy I didn't hurt you. You really are a fast learner, Pamela. Someday, maybe you will actually be using tampons instead of pads. For example, if you want to go swimming during your period, they are essential. Mrs. O'Connor added, Of course, girls tend to check up on their pads when they go to the bathroom. And I suppose you realize that from now on you have to pee sitting down just like a girl. You must remember to clean off your vagina with some tissue paper after you pee. Do you have to pee now? If so, we can make sure you do it right. Blake nodded his head yes. Good. Now you can also show the girls how you have learned to lift up your skirt. Blake repeated his earlier lesson by raising his skirt and sat down again on the toilet. He sat there for a minute or two trying to pee with the two girls and Mrs. O'Connor watching him. Well, Pamela, do you have to pee or not? Hurry up now, Mrs. O'Connor said. I'm trying, Blake said. Mrs. O'Connor started talking to the two girls about school, in particular whether they had heard about the results of the tryouts for the cheerleading squad which had just been held. All the girls in the club had auditioned. After another minute, Karen, Kathy and Amy came into the room to see what was happening. Blake sat there on the toilet trying desperately to pee with all 5 girls and Mrs. O'Connor standing next to him. How was your lesson, Pamela? Asked Karen. I think I understand what to do with my pads. Mrs. O'Connor was just teaching me how to pee like a girl. Yes, come on now, Pamela, we don't have all day, Mrs. O'Connor said. I'm sorry. I'm trying to go and I know that I have to go. It'll be just a minute more. The girls and Mrs. O'Connor resumed their conversation and Blake felt even more frustrated. The urge to pee was increasing at the same time as his clitoris had developed a very large erection. He was embarrassed that the girls were being held up waiting for him. After several more minutes, the conversation lulled and everyone turned their attention to Blake. He sat there surrounded by all the girls and Mrs. O'Connor. He now felt a tremendous desire to pee, and at the same time his penis had become very hard and he had no hope of peeing. He sensed the impatience of everyone, whom he was holding up from starting the day's activities. He was sweating and felt hot with his skirt and slip bunched up around him. He could feel his bra sticking to his skin from perspiration. The seconds ticked off in silence. I'm trying to go, I really am, he said frantically. We really do have to be going, Mrs. O'Connor said. Why don't you get up and let me pee, so I can get dressed? Then you can try again. As Blake reached between his legs to pull up his panties and pantyhose, the slight pressure on his penis caused him to explode in an uncontrollable orgasm. He grabbed his penis as the cum shot out in rapid pulses into his hand, narrowly missing his clothes or any of the girls. The pleasure he felt was extraordinarily intense, and he gasped loudly while shouting, "Oh, my God, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to me." The girls were at first stunned by the sudden excitement but then had to fight to suppress giggles as Blake frantically attempted to keep his cum from dripping down onto his clothes. "Oh, you poor dear," Mrs. O'Connor exclaimed. "We didn't realize that you were so frightened about peeing in front of us." She quickly pulled out a tissue from a dispenser and proceeded to clean up around Blake's thighs and penis. Then she turned on the faucet and led Blake over to the sink to wash off his hands. "Kathy, help Pamela get straightened up so I can get ready to go." Kathy took Blake by the hand and led him to Mrs. O'Connor's bed, where she helped him pull up his panties and pantyhose, and then smoothed out his slip and skirt. She got a hairbrush and straightened out his hair. He could see Mrs. O'Connor sitting on the toilet, and in a second he heard her release a confident stream of pee into the bowl. "Don't be upset, Pamela," Kathy said. "Some girls are very shy about peeing in front of others. I've even heard that in Japan many of the girls purposefully keep flushing the toilets so no one can hear them peeing. It's a terrible waste of water. I guess I've got just so much to learn. I don't know if I'm ever going to be a girl." Kathy sat down next to Blake and put her arm over his shoulder. There, Pamela, these are just your very first days of being a girl. Don't be upset. I'm sure that in the weeks and months ahead you're going to find yourself to be quite the young lady. I hope so. Mrs. O'Connor now came into the bedroom to get dressed. Come on, Pamela, you must forget about what happened. Why don't you help me choose an outfit for today? Okay, Mrs. O'Connor, Blake said, getting up. First we have to pick out a bra and panties from my drawer. She pointed to the second drawer of her dresser. Blake opened it up and saw that it was filled with several piles of bras on one side and panties on the other. She took off her nightie and its matching panties and placed them on the bed and came back to stand next to Blake totally naked. He couldn't help but notice her exquisite figure and large breasts topped with nipples almost as large as those on a baby bottle. He felt his heart racing as she said, "What do you think? Perhaps the light blue bra?" Blake saw the bra in question and picked it up. Yes, it is nice. The bra had very large cups like his mom's bras, but must have been much more expensive since the cups were entirely lace and very sheer. Partway down the panty pile he saw a light blue pair and asked, "Are those the matching panties?" "Yes, they are." "Oh, good, then this is the perfect set to wear today. Help me with the bra." Blake arranged the bra and held it out for Mrs. O'Connor to slip her arms through it. She then turned around and Blake clipped the back on the first set of hooks. "No, it should go in the middle hooks." "I'm sorry," Blake said as he adjusted the straps. He then gave her the panties which she stepped into and pulled up. "I think I'll wear jeans today and you can select a blouse for me from the next drawer down." She put on a pair of jeans she had hanging over the end of a chair while Blake closed the bra and panty drawer and opened the next one. On the right was stockings and pantyhose and on the left a neat pile of tops. He saw that there was a light blue one which he took out and gave to Mrs. O'Connor. She put it on and tucked the blouse into her pants. "How do I look?" "Oh, so very pretty, Mrs. O'Connor." "Just beautiful." "So, I'll just put on some shoes and we'll all be ready to go to the mall." That's all for now. See you in the next video, till then take care. Oh yes, please like and subscribe to my channel. And also share your feedback, it really means a lot to me.